I am not going to be on this panel alone. I have with me Peter and also Des. Please come along. Very well, we're going to dive in straight away. Chida, you did an amazing job for the first two sessions. So, like you said, there might be some overlaps as well. Hello everyone, my name is Jude Macaulay. If you forget my name, just remember the happy, holy homosexual. Yeah, that ties in with my religious work as well. And I can see that there is somebody from the Perpetual Indulgence Ministry. Very well. We're going to be talking about we're going to be talking about HIV, and you know, I'm sure from the conversation earlier today, we know that HIV affects everybody, and I just love the caption that is in the brochure, and I'm just going to read that out, and I'll do a little bit of my own journey just for a few minutes, and then I'll talk to my colleagues here. It's not a sin, and thank you, Natalia. Natalia's in the house. Put it out together for me, Natalia. It is certainly not a sin to live with HIV. But unfortunately, stigma and discrimination are still alive and kicking in 2026. After over 40 years of delivering groundbreaking support, services and campaign in Manchester, in this session, we hear from George House Trust and their innovative positive speakers about the impact of HIV in their lives and what we all should be doing to support our communities, not just in the world of cancer, but beyond. Let me start by saying that, you know, this month of January 2026 actually marks 23 years of my own HIV diagnosis. You know, I usually put a post out, you know, in January, but this year I didn't want to put anything out. But honestly, when I stood at the back, I said, Jude, share the message because somebody is going to come across your post very soon. So after today, I will make sure that I share the message before the day runs out. But also, within that, you know, having been raised in a very conservative religious community, I came out as gay. Just imagine coming out as gay as a Nigerian child is already a problem in itself, you know. As a Christian, I've been called an abomination. But you know what? I mean, even HIV, they also say, oh, that's the punishment for your homosexuality. But I'm still a person of faith because I'm also a priest. Oh my God, it gets complicated, doesn't it? But having said that, I think the reality is that, you know, we find the courage to move on. And I'm sure that there are 4 things that you've heard over and over again, and that's the HIV-related stigma, HIV-related shame, HIV-related denial, and HIV-related discrimination. And I trust that, you know, we as Solomon and George House Trust, obviously in the time that they've been around, we've been doing a lot of work to make sure that we break all of these things down completely. So with me today, I have Des. Des, you're going to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your work and your journey with George House and with HIV as well. And of course, we'll come to Peter, who's going to share some lived experience with us and also how the work is extended into the region. Go ahead, Des.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. I'm Des. Hi. I've been with George House Trust just 1 year. Best year of my life, genuinely. So the work that I do for George House Trust, I am very fortunate to I manage the peer support, so the peer mentoring program. So one of the things when somebody is diagnosed with HIV that really makes such an impact to their lives is to have somebody else to talk to, somebody else that has been there, somebody that has a commonality with you. Somebody who has felt, as Jude just said, discrimination, shame, the stigma, you know. So I'm responsible for having my little pool of absolutely fantastic mentors. Honestly, they change lives. These guys are incredible. So I'm the person that matches them up. It's not the fastest process. Because I don't want to mess up putting somebody that needs support and just throwing anybody at them. I want to make sure that the person I'm offering to them is going to be the most, like, the best match for them, if you like. So far, the ones I've done, I'm actually pretty proud of because they've worked quite nicely. I think one of the things that I would say is a challenge in my role is sometimes people will disengage. They might encounter, somebody that's discriminating to them. They might self-shame. They might be going through all sorts of different things that make them kind of pull away from the service. So other things that we do at George House Trust, just kind of jumping away from that. Sorry, I'm on a roll. Jude, that's it. Okay, I'll fill the hour. So other things that we do, I just got to kind of rave about. Last year in the summertime, we expanded our offerings. So we look after the Manchester region. We also, as Peter comes from Liverpool side of our services, but we decided to expand our offering, and that was with a team of peer navigators. So all of the satellite clinics around Greater Manchester, we've managed to put somebody in there now. So when somebody is going and they're getting the news about their diagnosis, we've got somebody there that is holding a hand out to them. Somebody that's saying to them, everything's going to be okay. So I think that in itself has really, really made a massive difference. And from that, you can appreciate, it's something that I know personally wasn't available to me when I was diagnosed 16 years ago, but I wish it was. I think it would help greatly. Back to you, Jude.
Absolutely. And honestly, you let's put our hands together for our guests. I think you're right. Because imagine 23 years old and 23 years old. 23 years ago, when I received my diagnosis, I was pretty much like a dark cloud over me. No one to talk to. I didn't even understand what was going on. And within hours of my diagnosis, I called a friend who I thought was going to be supportive, but goodness me, it was the wrong friend to call in that moment. So that actually made me sink into depression. But you're right about the services, because I'm also a mentor at George House Trust, which I'm very proud to do. And I think that we have several communities that can support us. Peter, let's hear from you.
Okay, hello everybody. So my name is Peter. I'm a sex worker for George House Trust, and before Dr. Knight has a heart attack. That means I do theory, not practice, and it's hourly paid rather than out by the hourly rate. So I'm based actually within the sexual health clinic in Liverpool, and I've been the privilege really of telling my story for the first time really, and quite a new position. So obviously I'm a gay man, I'm living with HIV, my phone's just switched off.
Wing it.
I was born in 1971, and I came of age in a society still hostile and dangerous for gay men, and one where you went to church if you wanted to be good. To be gay was a pervert, an outcast, to be a shame on yourself and to others, even to a God you tried so hard to believe in. At approximately 13, I saw the Don't Die of Ignorance leaflets delivered through every door, and even scarier to have adverts on telly. I was eventually diagnosed 25 years later, in the year 2000, at a time when the lack of treatment and death prognosis was still a very recent memory. Stigma and shame, then as now, shaped so much of how people saw us, how we saw ourselves, how I saw myself. Treatment was improving, but the emotional landscape was still full of fear, silence and shame, and I carried that with me for a long time. My involvement in chemsex didn't begin until years later. In 2007, during a trip to New York, I tried crystal meth for the first time, and it felt like something, well, a million orgasms all at once, and something inside me shifted. For someone who survived childhood abuse, who'd spent years feeling not too much and not enough at the same time, that felt like a confidence, connection, belonging and escape all at once. When I came back to the UK, that experience did stay behind me in America. It followed me home. But what pushed me deeper into that world was something I stumbled across completely by accident. I met someone who seemed just such a really lovely guy. We only met to sex a few times, and I was already in a deeply committed and open and honest relationship. I was and am someone who doesn't look for dark motives, and I discovered evidence that this guy was part of a paedophile ring. As someone who's been abused as a child, myself, it shook me to my core. It was like every old wound was ripped open, at once that I couldn't comprehend that anyone could harm a child. I still can't. And someone who grew up with Michael Jackson, loving Michael Jackson, trying to reconcile innocence with the aridity of youth and the inability to see why or who was overwhelming. I didn't have the tools then to process any of that. Catch myself up a bit. I didn't have the language. What I did have was camps. And they became the place I hid from things I couldn't face, not because I wanted to escape life, but because I didn't know how to live with the weight of what I'd seen and what I'd survived. What started as experimentation quickly became something far more consuming. I found myself using cleanse around the clock, smoking, injecting, losing myself in a cycle that felt impossible to break. Those years were chaotic, frightening and lonely. I'm still amazed that I survived. And survived them. I know many of those who haven't, who aren't as fortunate. At some points I was very, very ill mentally and physically. I was admitted several times to hospital for abscesses caused by poor injecting and lack of self-care. My shame was so great that I couldn't admit to myself what I was doing, let alone to those who already knew. There were times I couldn't make my clinic appointments. Due to the chaos, damage to my veins and scarred arms, all the questions I couldn't answer, no bloods meant no meds. And not taking them was so easier when cleanse were so easy to take. 2 years ago, this is what happened to my best man at my wedding, my best buddy, Nathan. He was using Tina daily, and he stopped taking his meds. Time ceases to exist when high on Tina. 2 years later, he was diagnosed with aggressive T-cell lymphoma. 6 weeks later, I held him in my arms in the hours before he died. It's a cold reminder of when services fail to truly be person-centered, fail to overcome a person's sense of shame. Yet I survived. Alive, intact, and in some degrees sane, that might be questionable. There were moments when I genuinely didn't think I would. Because I am lucky enough to have a husband and good friends who have proved to me time and time again that their love for me is unconditional. By nature that I would never intentionally harm anyone. I am and always will be a helper. From the beginning, I've always wanted to be a good boy. But it's what happened next, something so unexpected, that was really down to luck. While fighting and living with addiction is lifelong, my back of addiction was broken, not by a clinic, not by a therapy room, but a 5-month expedition driving coast to coast across Africa. I loved Malawi since I was the age of 9, when I was told about it by a teacher. It wasn't planned as a rehab, it was the fulfillment of a dream that was beyond my dreams, possibly the lowest point of my life. I was actually ejecting the 24 hours before I actually left, so I was actually really did go cold turkey. I was forced into a different rhythm, no chems, no sessions, no chaos, just long roads, vast landscapes, and the kind of silence in which you confront yourself. Africa didn't magically fix me, but it interrupted the cycle and gave me distance, physical, emotional, spiritual. It stripped everything back to the basics, eat, sleep, drive, and breathe. Most of all, it taught me the value of people, of social contact. That here in the West we have an epidemic of loneliness and a fear of intimacy, and the distorted values for disposable stuff over lives and experience. Okay, take my time, so I find myself here. When I returned home, I began the slow work of rebuilding. I reached out for support, real support. Not the kind that judges or lectures, but the kind that sits with you in the mess and helps you find your way out. But I was fortunate to be able to pay for private therapy. I had to resort to that. There's a 12-month waiting list, I think, for the NHS at the time. Still ongoing, I connected with people who understood trauma, who understood queer lives, who understood that chemsex isn't a single issue, but a web of unmet needs. And I learned something important. Harm reduction isn't about telling people to stop. It's about telling people, keeping people alive, connected and human. Recovery for me wasn't a straight line, it's a journey. It was a series of choices, some small, some huge, all shaped by compassion rather than shame. And my HIV diagnosis, which felt like the end of everything, became part of a new beginning. With treatment, I became undetectable. With support, I became grounded. With community, I became whole again. Today, I work with people living with HIV. I support people navigating chemsex. I sit with men who feel the same loneliness I've once felt, the same fear, yet enjoying the risks while regretting some of the extremes. The same longing to belong, and I tell them what I wish someone had said to me. You're not broken. You are not alone. Your story is not over. You have so much more to give. You can't help everyone, but you can help someone, and in that lies pure joy. Chemsex is not just about drugs or sex, it's about intimacy, identity, trauma, pleasure, and the search for connection in a world that still tells queer people we are too much and not enough at the same time. It's also about self-harm. It's also exhilaration of taking risks, which to gay men and those living with HIV, already taking drugs recreationally, high risk is normalised. If we want to respond to chemsex meaningfully, we have to stop treating it as a pathology and start treating it as a conversation, as we're doing now. One that includes mental health, community, trauma, sexuality, and the ongoing impact of stigma. This needs services that are culturally competent, trauma and shame informed, and generally not just queer, but person affirming. We need to replace shame with understanding and fear with compassion. We have to learn to ask questions. We have to learn to ask questions without shame. We are still terrible at it, unless you really believe that all smokers smoke 5 cigarettes a day. Most of all, we need to be truly person-centred, to meet people in their chaos, rather than them fitting into our routine, at least until the chaos subsides, and to grab any interaction as an opportunity to more as a team of services, treating the whole person. My journey hasn't been simple. Even today, it carries shame and regrets, but it has been transformative. I stand here today not because I escaped chemsex, but because I need to turn that journey to something positive and constructive, to share what I've learned, to help myself as well as others understand it, and myself with honesty and care. I am fearful. I'm fearful of the naivety of those who don't see it, those colleagues who should know better, those that refuse to work together, those who've lost sight for whom they exist, the service user, and most of all those men, those who think it's not a problem, and of those gay men and increasing other sexualities entering into this dark world that starts with a million orgasms, that ends in an infillable dark void of emptiness. Not to mention a world where increasingly a right-wing backlash is only around the corner, and when empathy is needed most. One of the most important parts of recovery is to be able to tell one's story and be heard. And that means firstly overcoming one's own shame and be faced with someone who listens and interested without judgment. And for this I thank you all. And if my story can help even one person feel seen, or help one professional rethink how they support our community, then every difficult chapter has meaning. So I thank you for listening, and thank you for being part of a future where queer people can seek connection without shame and support and judgment. Thank you.
It takes courage, to be quite honest, to do that. Thank you so much, Peter. And I didn't want to interrupt you as you were sharing that. I certainly did not. There was no need to interrupt you. It's just necessary for you to share and let people listen. And I think when we come to talk about lived experiences, these are the things that we want to hear. You know, the trials, you know, and the successes. We want to hear about all of them. But before I go back to you, Des, because there's something that you shared about the mentoring support at George House Trust. But before I come to you, I want to ask Peter a couple of questions. And for you, Peter, is you just shared with us an incredible experience. So what kind of support made the biggest difference at the key moment in your journey, which you shared quite a few? What was that key moment and the key support that you felt that you received?
That's really difficult. I did reach out to services when I knew I was really in trouble. Saying I was injected 24/7, literally just to blot out thoughts which I don't want to have. And there was a service in Liverpool at the time, and I had to actually educate the person who did the support, direct them to reset their different texts and things. So it actually came that I was actually helping the people who were meant to be helping me. And in Liverpool, in the situation today, we're just starting off a new service for people who are involved in chemsex, and it's really important to me that those services engage together, that we don't duplicate, and that we work in a coordinated fashion, and a person-centred, in a holistic person-centred way. It's my frustration when you see people saying, well, they've not turned up for their appointment. Well, because they probably remembered it tomorrow. The fact they turned up in clinic, you grab them and you seize them at that time. I've got one client who I'd seen for about 3 or 4 weeks who disclosed to me, this is the third session, that he had an injury in his arm, and that was just pre-abscess. And I went to one of the HIV nurses who said, we'll send him to the walking centre. This is a guy who's taken 3 weeks to disclose to me who's actually been involved in chemsex. You know, there's a huge hurdle for him to send to the walking centre. He's going to have to wait 6 hours and disclose to somebody who knew nothing about it. You know, that's not service. Luckily, the head of HIV actually saw him there, and that saved £400,000 to the NHS, year of their hospital admission. So that thing saying about saving money earlier on. You know, I think we're still at the beginning. I think we're lucky in Manchester because we can look nationally, internationally at Berlin, places where they've got excellent service, and not just take that excellence, steal it, but actually build upon it. And that's my ambition. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Hold on. Do you know, a few years ago, I took part in a series, a program where we had people that have been diagnosed at different times over the last 40 years. So people that were diagnosed in the early stages, people that were diagnosed maybe a decade later, and so on. And the idea of that documentary was to measure, you know, how we respond to HIV care, you know. And there were people that were diagnosed, like say last year, who, like, oh, well, it's just another thing we move on. And I think that is the virtue of the experiences that we share, and also the work that organizations like Georgia's Trust, you know, we as survivors have done. So, just going back to you, Peter, I'm sorry, guys, hold on 1 second. Now that you're in Liverpool, how does the Liverpool service context shape the way support is delivered? Considering that, you know, you just told us that when you were diagnosed, it was very poor services available. How does that change?
Disagree. I was actually with George House Trust, who actually supported me, take my employer to court, so, and we won. I think in Liverpool, I think nationally there's a real naivety. I remember going to a chaps conference 20 years ago where they said that crystal meth was just arriving in London. And I responded to that, which was bloody joking. They're dealing it in Leyland, Lancashire. You know? And in Liverpool, the same naivety. We're not seeing it through the door. Nobody's asking why. They just think it doesn't exist. You can't see it doesn't exist. And that's backed up by data, because there is no data, so it doesn't exist. I asked my dealer how many people he was dealing to per week in Liverpool, and he's dealing to 500 people. And they're dealing on, that's just one dealer of crystal meth. So that is going on. And a lot of that might not be problematic, but you know, it starts somewhere. It doesn't start with moderate usage, it starts with people using regularly with no issues at all. You know? It only takes something like an event, trauma, to actually that escalate into something which is really serious. I'm very, very lucky I've never had psychosis, but I've had 3 people I've had defection because of psychosis. You know, and I've not gone to from the darker areas where I went to. It does get really, really dark, scary. So.
Thank you so much. Well, put your hands together for Peter, honestly. I think the services are definitely important. I moved from London to Manchester 4 years ago, and honestly, even before I arrived in Manchester, I've already signed up with Georgia's Trust. And honestly, within a few days of me being in Manchester, I've already attended my first peer support group called Calabash, and I love it so much. And yeah, I was there last night, and we did have jollof rice, which is a deal. It's a big deal, trust me, if we come to Calabash. So Des, back to you. From the work at Georgia's Trust, how will you describe the current landscape of HIV support in relation to chemsex and these other things?
Okay, so you know, through the other sessions, obviously, we've talked about all the kind of connecting pieces. When it comes down to the landscape regarding HIV, with the layer of chemsex coming into it, within our services, you know, I'm looking directly at the person that works for our intent support. So we're talking about, you know, Peter shared, and thank you for that. I have to say, crikey, you nearly got me. I've got a room full of people staring at me, and I'm like, my lips going, eyes are welling. Yeah, so I'll get you to that later. But you know, we're talking about people that are in the chemsex kind of, yeah, they're involved in the chemsex thing going on, and that reduces inhibitions. You mentioned, Peter, about not adhering to medication. You know, these are the kind of risks that, when people are engaging in chemsex, if they're not taking their tablets, if they're not aware of who, if they're in like a state of euphoria and they're not aware of who they're engaging with, it does open that kind of casket of risk, doesn't it? So I think the landscape, we're doing great things. I think it's fantastic to have connections. So we work with Paul from Reach. So Reach is one of our kind of support networks when we do encounter people that are coming to us that are engaged in chemsex community. And also we've got the guys at We Are Survivors. So it's fantastic that we all kind of work in synergy and we go to each other for the support that we need.
Fabulous. I was just thinking back because when I first came out as gay, oh my God, when I first came out as gay, I was thinking, what did the new gay do? I honestly speaking, because obviously, I won't say I lived a sheltered life, but as someone that was born and raised in a very conservative Christian family, the club life wasn't part of our life. So when I started to go to the club, it was very different. And of course, when I went to the club, I didn't see people like Marcel, I didn't see a lot of black people. So I came back home one day and said, oh my God, I don't think black people are gay. And then I was introduced to a church community in London that was inclusive and affirming, the Metropolitan Community Churches, if anybody know about it. So when I went along, I was in Camden Town, I was also the only black person there. I said, God, this is really true, black people are not gay, there's no gay people in church. But the reason I'm saying this is because I want to ask questions around the services and the holistic approach. Do you understand me? Do you have a lot of diversity, because we talk about chemsex. I got HIV from sex, which we already talked about. Do you understand me? Obviously, I think chemsex is another area, another impact to say. So with chemsex, what's the diversity level in chemsex? Do you have a lot of black people or people of color that are also equally affected? Just run us through that.
So it's unlike really other substance misuse, it kind of crosses all ages and all incomes. I've seen people at the age of 17, I've seen people at the age of 70 odd surrounding with no idea how to do it. No harm minimisation going on. And all economic scales, from people who are unemployed, asylum seekers, you're often usually trying to get a bed for the night, go on Grindr, the drugs there, they'll take the drugs and then eventually the drugs become the method of engaging. In terms of our service at George House Trust, one of the things I'm really, really proud about George House Trust is that we treat people in a holistic fashion. It's very person-centred. Everybody's an individual, everybody's got their own individual story and their needs are individual. So when we do an assessment on someone, we don't just talk about HIV, we talk about where they're living, what their finances are, what their social structures are. All basically, like some people, like the clinicians look after the easy bit, the blood and the your medications. We look after everything else. We're not miracle workers. We can sometimes point you in the right direction. A lot of it comes down to you. We empower people as well, and try not to create no dependency. But it is a very holistic service. So.
I'm going to disagree with you on one thing. That we're not miracle workers. Trust me, we are miracle workers. Honestly, to be quite honest, many of us in this room, if any of our friends or anyone, even a stranger, comes to us and say, I've been recently diagnosed with HIV, I guarantee you that between 12 to 24 hours, you have changed their mind in how they think about it. You are the safe space, and that is a gift, that's a miracle. I'm a priest, I've never performed a miracle, but this miracle, I own it. Because I tell people that, you equals you. Don't please say that. Listen, honestly, let me come back to both of you, and I'll start with you, Des. Because I did remember when we were preparing for this session, we did touch about faith, because I am a Christian, I'm gay, I'm black and African, as you can see. Beautiful. And I also talked about, honestly, there's this professor in London, I can't remember her name, honestly, for the life of me. But but for many of you from London, do you know where Dean Street is? The clinic? It's actually next door to a church, St. Anne's Church in Soho. So a lot of gay men will come to the clinic, that have been impacted by chemsex and things like that, or even sex generally and their diagnosis. And they'll complain to this doctor about how they believe God is going to punish them and then they're going to hell. This woman literally took herself to the church to go and talk to the priest. Say, what the hell are you doing to my clients? This is what I'm saying. So, and I think it's important that we talk about faith as well. So, how can faith-based and community organizations work more effectively alongside clinical services? Even organizations like Georgia's Trust.
Okay, I think with regards to faith, when somebody comes and they appear on our doorstep, faith is something that obviously we respect, because, everyone has their beliefs. With regards to kind of other services and working with them, really I think it has to come down to the person with HIV going to their church, to their faith, to their organisation, and having, a very, very open conversation with them. Get them involved, just tell them the challenges, tell them how it feels to be living with HIV, and to kind of throw the ball into their court, if you like. As an organisation, we, as Peter mentioned, we're all about the person. So, a very holistic, person-centred approach. So every single person gets the respect from us that they well and truly deserve.
That's very good, thank you so much. And I think that the others, let me probe you further. I'm doing a good job. I think with the mentoring program, for example, honestly, I think that, for those of us that sign up to be mentors, we put down all of our different criteria and things that we do and interests. And of course, when people also come to be mentored, you understand me, it will be great to match this one. Do you get maybe one or two people that talk about their faith and their struggles, and if you can match them with a mentor? How has that worked so far?
Yeah. Absolutely. So I mentioned earlier about it not being always a fast process. Some it can be really, really quick, and I can spot it immediately. I have other challenges, whether it's faith. So obviously, if somebody is, for example, of Muslim faith, I want to match them with somebody equally that is living with HIV that is of the same faith. I don't want to throw anything more into the mix of somebody having faith as a barrier, if you like, from them. A shared faith, shared commonalities really is something that I'm completely hot on. I'm completely hot. Did I just say that? Thanks. No, but if you think of not just from a faith aspect, we've got things, there are challenges. So I have people that only speak French. So, for example, I have a woman that speaks French. She doesn't speak English. So I need to find somebody that is living with HIV that speaks French. So it's sometimes it can be massively challenging. So I've just given that example purely and simply because that one and the person with Muslim faith are two that I'm kind of, I want them to be matched quicker because ultimately, we want to kind of embrace that person and give them the support that they need. So yeah, there can be challenges.
And you're doing a good job, that's what I'm saying. Peter, just one more question for you. We're going to turn to our lovely friends in the audience. So just get your questions ready or comments. Peter, honestly, I hope you're going to write a book, honestly, about your experience, even if it's a small one. Because I think lived experiences make a difference, honestly. And that's why I no longer, I didn't hesitate this month, but I didn't hesitate to share that I'm living with HIV. Actually, before I ask this question, sorry, you know, I was on a plane coming back from South Africa, and I don't mean to brag, you know. And I was coming from a conference, honestly, I was coming from a conference of it was an international network of religious leaders living with HIV. So I sat in my seat, and the seat on the inside was empty, and I said, God, please let the seat be empty. You know, we who fly economy, I can fly, it was first class. So it's economy, you need extra room. So I was hoping that the seat would be empty, but honestly, in the last minute, someone came and occupied the seat. So we had to make friends, because it's going to be 11 hours. So they asked me, what brings you to South Africa? I just told them I'm here for a conference of people with HIV, HIV. Goodness me. I thought it was going to be the most uncomfortable flight, but it turned out to be incredible. We had great conversations for most of the 11 hours, and we're still friends today. So sometimes sharing our stories can enlighten and broaden minds as well. So Peter, here is your question, and we're going to turn to the audience. Right. Thank you for your big experience. No, it's not a difficult question. It's not a difficult question. It's just about connecting with people. What do you wish professionals and community leaders understood about lived experiences with HIV, with chemsex, and all of our diagnosis? What do you think?
I think this should be used more. One, because for me personally, it helps me, because actually by talking about it, I'm actually accepting it, making it real. And that's about accepting my own past, I suppose. Also because, you know, if you deliver training or something, you've got professional training, something you've got no knowledge about, not lived experience, it becomes, it's not real. You don't have this, part of this is because we're having a conversation. It's not corporations talking to you, it's actually us having a conversation, and that's, people learn far more from that. And if you're going it from an ignorant lens, you can do so much more harm than you can do good. You know, so we've got a really good example of one of our BBV nurses who had a young lad who said he was taking crystal meth, and she turned around and said, "You don't want to do that, they'll put you around like a rag doll." And I'm like, "Oh, you've not seen Bolton's 42 loads, have you?" Yeah, so yeah, so it's about we all, you know, everybody can learn more, and you know, and it's just by keeping your mind open. That even you might think you know it, you don't necessarily do. You know?
Thank you so much. Put our hands together for the person. So we've covered the grounds a little bit. So we need your input now. Any questions? Yeah, I can see hands okay. I'm going to be like Cheddar.
So Darren said this morning that some of these conversations might be difficult. And this might be difficult, Peter, because you know where I'm going to come from. So my name's Chris, I work for Access Sexual Health and I'm a service manager. And I just want to reassure you all, I am a colleague of Peter's and we are friends. The word you used about the situation in Liverpool was naivety. And I want to challenge that. Because we've had this conversation before. Sorry, we've had this conversation before. Services cost money. So to provide the service, you need to have funding. And funders require stats and data. So if people don't disclose, and we can't gather the stats, we can't go to the funders to ask us without any evidence. So it's not about naivety. If services could be run on passion, then our reach would be limitless. But it's not, it costs money. And if funders don't fund, we can't provide the service without evidence. And I'd hope you'd expect me to come back if you want that.
I did actually mention earlier on that about stats, and that the lack of stats means that we haven't got services. When I meant naivety, I meant nationally, not just in Liverpool. You know, even in London, where it's really the epicentre of chemsex. They're saying that chemsex teams only just arrived in London, when it's been dealt with in Lancashire. You know, so that's at that level of naivety, really. And I did say about, you know, if we haven't got the evidence, I mean, one of the major barriers, I get people disclosing to me about chemsex in the clinic, because I work in the sexual health clinic, but they're not disclosing to the practitioners. And the major barrier there is they don't want it on their medical records. So it's about having that conversation. Actually, your HIV records are kept secret from your general medical records. You know, it's, you know, it's a different conversation we need to have. Yeah. So it's not criticism, it's per se.
Hi, Peter. I just wanted to defend you actually because I feel like you were really brave in telling us your story, and to be challenged in that way didn't feel very fair. So I think the way I understood Peter was that by not having the data, naivety is created within the service. And I think that's really valid. So thank you for sharing your story.
That's where I was coming from, yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much.
Hi. So when Darren and I first started talking about on it and kind of chems, I can never remember what order, sex, chems, HIV, consent. I am of a certain age, which means that I remember what happened in late 80s, early 90s, and someone said it before, the survivor guilt. I'm a survivor of sexual harms as well, so I have the survivor guilt of I cannot believe I am HIV negative. It just blows my mind when I think about all of my lot who were together. There's me and one other that are kind of left, so I have all of that. I have my own survivor stuff from the sexual abuse, etc. And over the past, we have survivors who've been going for 17 years nearly. And in the last 17 years, I've seen huge, incredible steps forward from George House Trust, from Terence Higgins Trust. We can't talk about this subject without having a moment in our mind to think about David Stewart and what David did. You know, we have to kind of remember those people who have really took us forward. However, I am terrified, genuinely, that we're rolling back. The stigma, I know we talk about you equals you and it's fantastic, but I worry that the stigma is growing. And in this particular case, in HIV, people who are HIV positive and chemsex, is too many gay men have come to our service where they have woken up in the middle of something happening, they have tested positive later. What can we do from your experience and your knowledge? What can we do to grab hold of that stigma before it kind of takes hold of the rest of us? Again, we've been here before, let's not forget that. Tell me what we can do. As a leader in this field, tell me, because I need to go and do it.
Doing it right here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And what I really like, I love the north. I'm from Devon originally. I moved up north because I love it, 'cause people are nicer. I'm more scared to give of monkeys about money. Compared to London is very corporate, and I learned a lot, and I'm not criticising London because they actually put it on the agenda, and David Stewart put a name on it, you know, and it's in his massive shoes that we walk, you know. The conversation starts here, and for me, the stigma, I'm very lucky as a gay man. I knew that coming out meant you set yourself free. And there's nothing more scary than coming out. Same with HIV, when I was diagnosed positive in 2000, we were told, don't tell anybody. You know, don't tell anybody. But now it's, you go into a clinic, I've got HIV as well, you know? It's fine, I'm well, you know? So they're changing that message, actually it's okay to actually talk about it. And today, talking about my own life with chemsex, was a huge surrogate. I'm no longer in the closet, I'm out, and it sets you free. And the more people that do that, the more people join that conversation, because everybody's got their own experiences. My experience is just one, that's millions, you know? Be out to that conversation. My big fear, looking over to America, looking at a certain knobhead in the retard party, is Daily Mail gets over this, we're going to be crucified, you know, and then it shuts us all down, you know. So there is an urgency to it as well.
How you're right. With more openly queer people, particularly gay bisexual men, engaging in PrEP, have you seen an increase in referrals coming from heterosexual and MSM communities into your services?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think with, you know, it's one of those things, isn't it? You know, we, as kind of gay community, we have something that people enjoy and it's fabulous, and it crosses over because heterosexuals want to enjoy it too. So yeah, there is an increase in it. Yeah. Just going back to Duncan's thing about stigma and you know, how do we address it? And quite rightly, Peter said, it's here, it's in the room. You know, these kind of things are where it starts. But I think from being a person living with HIV, self-stigma can be absolutely crippling. So, you know, it's important to have the services that we have to address that. So, you know, addressing it really from kind of grassroots up is super important as well.
Oh, thank you. We've talked quite a lot today. Oh, is it too loud or too quiet? It's all the semaphores. I'm very visually distracted. You're just waving like. Shut the fuck up, sister. Enough of the fucking noise.
Let's go to it.
Now that I want to ask anyone, for fuck's sake, I'll keep it very brief. Okay, so I should actually say as well thank you and to everybody who shared stories today. I think it's absolutely essential. On that question of sharing stories, one of the areas where stories are shared a lot in ways that inform the collection of data that we've talked about always suffers through lack of funding and outreach. I volunteer for a local sexual health clinic quite regularly, almost weekly, as a verifier, as a sort of host verifier, and people come in and they talk about what their concerns are, what their sexual practices be. That kind of talking data we know is really, really important. I think there is sometimes questions about how much that really sort of point of talking data isn't necessarily used or harnessed, or have our own methods to really always get sort of feedback on how much you gain from that point of talking. And one of the things I want to sort of query about this is, firstly, why isn't there more investment at that level of getting that kind of information and giving those people who do, maybe are just volunteers as well as paid workers, to be able to pass that data on to people who are creating policy and applying for funding. But more importantly, I think at the moment, a raised question I have is about in the national strategy released in December, there was a sort of a kind of importance placed on digital services provision of of safer sex information and access to PrEP, access to condoms, OnlyFans, all the rest of it. And concomitantly, there's one particular sort of growth area in providing kind of at source, you know, text this number to get all your sexual health resources. And I've forgotten the name of it, to be honest, it's something 24. But, SH24. Now I noticed that in various local outfits they've been asking people working and volunteering in sexual health to give them a ring and contact them to give us our information. By the same token, when I looked at their website, there was very little that I felt linked to the LGBTIQA community and some of the people that we work with. But there seems to be a huge number of NHS resources being placed in that area. So my question is, how can we ensure that any kind of investment in digital services and kind of movement of NHS money as part of national strategies, how can that connect to the kind of work we're doing and that kind of point of talking that isn't just about people texting, I want this, this and this, I want this PrEP and I want this SHS, you know, these tests. How can we keep the talking part section?
That's a really challenging question.
Yeah.
I'm one of the big advocates for self-testing. I'm arguing about HIV testing kids. People say you can't do that once it comes back positive. And I'm well, a 16-year-old will get a pregnancy test. That's fine, isn't it? Yeah. So it's really good that people are tested. That's the most important thing of all. In terms of narrative, we're quite lucky at GHT that we can provide a narrative for our reports, and I always try and include any chemsex in that. I also attend the Fast Track City 30 meetings, and chemsex is hardly mentioned at all. It's really important if you want to achieve zero new transmissions by 2030, that we include chemsex. Yeah? And also, we have to start thinking outside the box. You know, nobody mentioned where somebody's employed a part-time outreach worker for chemsex. He's got no lived experience. Where are you going to do outreach? Because people who do old chemsex don't go to nightclubs, they don't go to saunas, they go and grind. They go first of all to their dealer. So there's a thing about criminality and maybe using some dealers to actually do harm minimisation. And you've got a problem there with the law. Grindr, which has only recently started allowing us access to dealer promotion. And people's homes. You can start paying person, excuse me, can I talk about sex to you? It's not going to happen. So the problem getting that data is about the the places where people present, they don't present to traditional drug services, because that's for heroin and cocaine. That's how people view it. They present in a sexual health clinic. They regularly come to the sexual health clinic, most people, and it's about asking those questions in the right and culturally appropriate way, and not just, do you smoke? How often do you smoke? 5 a day? It's actually been a bit more clever than that, and I've not got the answer to that either. I'm just saying it needs to be out there that we need to be asking that question. Okay.
When Adam Williams was on I Kissed a Boy last year, he talked about how people would ask him on dating apps, are you clean? And I think this is one of the ways that the re-stigmatisation is coming back. Do you have any advice on either sharing your status on dating apps or not, or how you'd like those of us who are not positive, but are not wanting to be discriminatory to positive people, how we might talk about that? Because it seems to me it's legitimate to ask, how do you engage in HIV prevention, which might be, I take my HIV meds, I take PrEP, I use condom, there's a series of things, but how would you, potentially a positive person or somebody who knows about this, like people who are not positive, to talk about HIV and sexual health?
Okay, at work I get that question quite a lot, so I talk to clients, I call clients service users, because I don't like the word client service user. I talk to clients and I say, well, you don't have to use the first person. I've got a friend with HIV, I find that a bit offensive. What do you mean by that? Or not necessarily be offensive, actually to educate. So I've been asked before, are you clean or are you POS or whatever else? And I say, well, actually, yeah, I am. But you equals you. They ask why that is. And so rather than me answering, I just put a link to the facts. Because that way there's no dispute. And that even to it. The same with clients. Liverpool is about 15 years behind Manchester. Trying to explain when we first set service up in Liverpool why we haven't got services if you're ready to go. It's because Liverpool is one of the most deprived cities in the country. It's also had the biggest cuts to its services. So all services are firefighting. You've got waiting lists for every service. So one of the advantages of being GHHT, because we work in a holistic way, is that we can actually get results. We take charge or take ownership of a client rather than just signposting them on all the time. Sometimes you need to do that, but when we can, we actually we carry our caseload. I've lost my track of thought now. Do you want to put that in?
From like a personal aspect, somebody saying, "Are you clean?" Straight away, inference, you're dirty. Peter shared his story. I just want to kind of share something, and then you will kind of get the gravity of when somebody asks you something like that on Grindr, for example. I took a holiday to Gran Canaria, went on my own first night, chatting to somebody in a nightclub. Guy was from Leeds, fantastic. Oh, you're a northerner, great stuff. Watch my drink. I went to the loo, came back. Next day, dark room, blood, raped. And 3 months later, diagnosed with HIV. When somebody asks me if I'm clean, that's like a knife. So I think it comes down to people just being human, having sensitivity, using BEVA, the British HIV Association, have something called the People First Charter, and it's about appropriate language. So it's about kind of people just giving thought, being human, but also kind of phrasing things in a way that they're not going to come across as offensive, and just being a little bit kinder to people.
To answer your question a little bit, what can other people do? Because there were really great questions in I live with HIV as well, and I know how it cuts like a knife when someone asks that question. So I've lived with HIV for 2003 to do the maths, and that's my whole adult sexual life. So I've lived through pre-U, pre-PrEP, and through all those changes. And it was only my most recent partner who we met about 5 years ago, where something magic happened, because he turned around to me, we'd been dating, and it was clear that we were it was going somewhere, and he turned around to me and he said, I'm taking PrEP, what will make you most comfortable? And it gives me chills now thinking about it, because he was the first person in, at that point, 17, 18 years of living with HIV, who held that conversation for them. I always held that conversation with other people because I wanted to make sure that they were safe and that I was safe. So I think the thing that people who are HIV negative can do the best is hold that conversation, because actually it is so liberating for someone living with HIV to have that taken off your shoulders.
Thank you so much. Continue to put your hands together. We have talked about HIV in the most sensitive way, and also maybe sometimes painful as well. But I think that, I want to say thank you to Peter for sharing your lived experience. Thank you so much. And also want to thank Des, for talking about their own experience and also the work that they do at Georgia's Trust. I can't believe you've just been there 1 year. You've really impacted many of us in that 1 year. And finally, I also want to thank me.